Welcome, everybody. I'm Tim Wright. This is Freedom and Survival, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the books that I recommend for preparing your heart and mind for what is coming. And what I put on the table is just a little sampling, and what I have is even less. What I want to do is just give you an idea as to why I think this is important. And my mic is, I tried adjusting my mic, and I think I screwed it up. I might have to do a complete reset here. But anyways, let's continue on with this. The main thing is I am testing my stream out because I've had a whole lot of technical difficulties, and the stream wanted to continuously stop and cut out on me, and so I just had so much difficulty going through and having the stream complete itself. And so before we get into this, I'm just going to go through a quick station identification, and then we're going to go ahead and get into some of these reasons why I think this is important to get your heart, mind, and soul ready for what I see coming down the pipe. And let me just put this up here real quick. Again, as I said, this is Freedom and Survival, and in a second I'll be right back to go through why this is going to be utterly important. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to kind of go through a little bit of history with you, and just chart the way to where we are today, and then give you just three little small reasons that have come about in the past 10 days, let's say, to include two of them which has come about actually last night and this morning by the way of email alerts that I got from American Military News. And these are just newsworthy items. But if you look at and understand how back in the day we would collect intel, not from satellites and not from things like that, or laser from an airplane, but we would collect intel from radio, from newspapers, from television news, and things like that. And so I think that that kind of understanding and intel gathering and connecting the dots, though you have to be careful about who's saying what, I think there is something to be said for just staying alert. And we need to discuss that. This is not going to be in this video, but just having a situational awareness and understanding what is going on and discerning what is going on around you. And that's part of what I'm going to share with you here in just a few minutes. But Tucker Carlson, he made the statement in an interview 11 days ago. So it's not 10 days, it's 11 days ago. And I'm going to play this clip for you, and then I'm going to share. Actually, I'm not going to play the clip for you. That's going to be the last thing I'm going to do before I get into the books. Let's go back to Bill Clinton's Vietnam era. And when Vietnam was going on and they instituted the draft, Bill Clinton decided he was going to dodge the draft and head off to Russia. Heading off to Russia is dot number one. So what you want to do is write things down, connect the dots, and this is just a small sampling of the little trail that's going to lead us to where we are, excuse me, right now. Okay? So Bill Clinton, to dodge the draft, heads to Russia. And I believe he spent at least 2 or 3 years there. I can't remember what it was. So he heads off to Russia, and then you have Hillary Clinton, Hillary Rodham. At the time, she was Hillary Rodham. Hillary Rodham Clinton, in her college years, starting in her freshman year, decided to be mentored under Bill Ayers, who was the communist leader of the Weather Underground in Chicago. If you remember the World Fair being blown up, he was responsible for that, and World Fair, something like that. He was responsible for that, and to this day, he still mentors people in the Saul Alinsky rules. That would be communist rules. But she's not the only one who has had a major part in American or the United States' policies and policy making. Now, she was never in Congress. She was never, well, I can't say that. She was a senator. She became a senator of New York for a while, so that statement's not true. But she has held various positions of policymaking, we'll put it that way. And her and Bill Clinton are going to come back up. Obama also was schooled in under or mentored under Bill Ayers in the Weather Underground as well. So both of them, and actually all three of them, have distinct ties to a communist mindset. Okay? And then we go to Daddy Bush, whose grandfather was, I believe it was his grandfather was Preston Bush. I don't think it was his father. Anyways, Preston Bush was one of the financiers of Hitler, along with some of the other key names for World War II. And also, if you remember, Daddy Bush constantly spoke about New World Order. Then you come to Bush Jr. Now, I hope you're connecting these dots. So you come to Bush Jr., and one of the things that happened was 9/11. And, of course, one of the key buildings that went down was an FBI storage building of some very critical, nefarious global documentation of the U.S. Big Brotherhood. So then you have, and I'm saying things in a way that I'm hoping don't get me knocked out, if you know what I mean, by media. So then you have all of that taking place. We have things going on in the Middle East. And then under Bush Jr., you have the NDAA. In his last year, with the National Defense Appropriations Act, we had pork put into it, just like every other legislation. And with that, come on now, can't get this mic just right. And with that, you have sections 1031 through 1033 declaring the U.S. a national battle zone or a national war zone. And that is utterly unconstitutional. That did two things. That opened up the next sections where it, number one, allowed the military and authorized the military to come into your home, your domicile, your car, your hotel room, wherever you are, and haul you off and detain you and torture you indefinitely, so long as there was a time of war. And that time has never, ever yet ceased. Not under Donald Trump, not under Obama, not under Joe Biden. I've not heard of any of these things being rescinded. In fact, only one person in Congress and all of Senate said no, and that was Rand Paul. And then the next person with him who supported him to try. And Rand Paul said, that's fine, but exclude American citizens. And all of the Senate and all of the Congress said, no, we're including everybody on our soil. And Tim Pool with Tim IRL livecast or what, Tim IRL cast or whatever podcast or whatever he calls himself, he touched on this here a couple days ago when he also mentioned that they allow themselves or give themselves authority to haul American citizens off into floating gulags off of our shores, and I know that to be a fact. And I can tell you where 2 of them are. So you have these dots. The NDAA, the second thing that the NDAA did that was utterly unconstitutional is the fact that the president, the Congress, and the military is designed by the Constitution to protect our sovereignty and our borders. And by declaring the U.S. a battle zone or a war zone, that authorizes not only what I just said, but it authorizes World War III to be fought on our soil. So then you have Executive Order under Obama, Executive Order 13603, where he basically took complete control of all of, under executive order, of all of every bit of media infrastructure, food, transportation, communications, manufacturing, and also declared that he could employ you and me anytime he wanted to without compensating you or me, and that you would only have one chance to say no. If you said no, you'd have one chance to change your mind, and then they would send you off to one of the secretaries or directors, and then throw you under this NDAA bus and call you a terrorist, and there would be no evidence required and no trial by jury. Okay, so that was under Obama, and it started under Bush, and it's carried through. Then you have Obama's 8 years, and in his first quarter, something very significant happened, and that was Russia and Iran and Venezuela and North Korea signed a nuclear pact around the United States, creating a nuclear horseshoe around the United States. And then at the same time, Russia put missiles back into Cuba. People said I was out of my mind. And the following summer that happened, our satellites picked up technicians arming those missiles in Cuba. And at the same time, Russia was building small arms factories in Venezuela, as well as ICBM missiles, and those ICBM missiles can reach the northern border with Canada.
Here's my view of it.
I don't want you to go away. So then you have that. Now I'm going to come back to that because something else significantly just come on the radar last night. So we're going to come back to that in just a moment. So then from there, if you remember, Russia and China have not been buddy. Russia and China were actually opposed. But then you have Russia and China who, in the same time frame as the nuclear pact creating a horseshoe around the United States, Russia and China became buddies and in business decided to do business as far as having an alliance to buy and sell oil and natural gas. And that's what we're going to come back to. These two facts we're going to come back to after we listen to Tucker Carlson and what he's got to say, because This is all getting tied together right now as we live and breathe. So then under Obama, you had Fast and Furious, where Obama and Holder and Rahm decided to run guns down into Mexico to the cartel. But at the same time, you've got the Chinese who are running the Mexican ports because under Bush, the Chinese wanted to run our ports due to our trade agreements with China, and the U.S. said, no, we're giving that to the Arabs because of the oil. So they gave that to the Arabs. It ticked the Chinese off. So the Chinese are running the Mexican ports, and in so doing, they've created military assets in Mexico. And since then, they have been given over due to treaty. Now this is due to treaty. They've been given the Panama Canal back. So you've got Russia down in South America, in Venezuela. You've got the Chinese in Panama and in Mexico. And then in 2013, you had the Russians come in and train. They come in through the Canadian transport into the U.S., not under Russian vehicles, but under Canadian vehicles, into the U.S., through Goose Lake Neck, Montana, and down into Colorado to train on our top secret helicopters and our top secret tanks. As well as the fact that you had a lot of other Russians go into Denver International Airport and train on hostage interdiction situations. And those people got simulated into our interstate quick reaction teams. Those Russians can speak better English than you and I do. And the people that are on those teams that are American don't even know which ones are American and which ones are Russians. Those guys have not left either. Now, back in 2013, you could have Googled this stuff, and you would have found it. I don't know if you'll find it today. I don't know if they've gotten rid of those links or not. You can find it on the dark web, but I don't think you're going to find it on the actual internet itself. So you have all that stuff going on. Now, let me ask you this question. If you have the Russians coming in through Goose Lake Neck, Montana, and the Canadians are scared to death, the Canadians who are bringing these people in are scared to death of what the Russians are telling them, and they're out of their minds, basically, and this is a figure of speech, but they just can't, they're blown away by what the Russians are telling them that they're doing in our country because of the overriding goals of what is going on. Why would we allow these Russians to be training in our country? Why? Unless there's people in our country that are in fact Russian operatives and allowing all of this to happen. And so you have that. You have that to deal with. Then you have the Bundy Ranch, where certain Congress people decided they wanted to sell federal land to their own gain to the Chinese for solar power. And then you have Uranium One, where Hillary was and did sell our greatest deposit and possibly the world's greatest deposit on our soil to the Russians. Now, how do you know that? How do I know that? Because ham radio conversations were intercepted by people that I know. And during that time, there was military road and special forces over there in Oregon in that whole situation. Now, why were there military checkpoints and special forces, and why was Lavoy Finnegan shot in the snow? And people will say, well, he had a gun. Well, the original satellite footage shows that he did not pull a gun, and he did not flash a gun. And certain operations of deniability, plausible deniability, were the ones that pulled the trigger. So why do you have all of this Russian and Chinese collusion stuff going on our soil long before Donald Trump became president? And so now we come to today. Let me play for you this clip from Tucker Carlson, and then we'll go into this a little bit deeper. So let's hear from Tucker Carlson.
I think the lies are unsustainable. Lying is always unsustainable. You're always found out in the end, whether in your lifetime or posthumously. But lies are always revealed by their nature. And these lies are so big and so obvious and so stupid that it's going to be very clear to the majority of voters before the election that the Biden administration has no idea what it's doing, that Joe Biden is not running the government, and that it's not working at all. And I think by that point, we're going to have a real economic contraction. I think we're going to be in the teeth of a very tough recession, and that makes everything much more intense. And so,
okay, so let's talk about that for just a moment. An economic contraction. The powers that be have told us they're going to do an economic global reset. Folks, that's a little bit more than a contraction. So, and I don't know this to be a fact, but others have said too, that Tucker behind the scenes believes what I'm telling you, and he is just speaking softly so as to not get kicked off of the air. So let's, if you can connect the dots of a wealth transfer and a complete reset. If you can connect those dots, you just connect those dots, okay? Let's continue.
And so if your goal is to maintain power, and if you think once you relinquish power, the problem with criminalizing politics is the people who do it imagine or know that it will be done to them. So once you start indicting your political opponents, you know that you have to win or else they're going to indict you if they win, right?
Right.
And so they can't lose. They will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. I know everyone on the right's afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandate. They're not going to do that. They can't do that. If they've already been exposed, that won't work. There's going to be, no, what are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia. That's what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. And
really?
Yes, of course. They want it anyway. I don't think we'll win it, but that's a separate analysis. But I think it's a political matter. They need to declare war footing in order to assume war powers in order to win. I believe that. And I think the evidence suggests that's true. So if you're worried about our politics getting even more vicious than it already is, and people being hurt in our politics, which is entirely possible, you should be worried about the prospect of an open war. We're already at war with Russia, of course. We're funding their enemies. So we're fighting Russia. But I mean, an open battle with Russia where we say we're at war with Russia. I think that could easily happen. I think we could Tonkin Gulf our way into it, where all of a sudden missiles land in Poland. The Russians did it. Our NATO allies been attacked. We're going to war. I could see that happening very easily. So if you're worried about that, you need to put as much pressure as you possibly can on the Republican-held Senate to force a peace, which can be done. The United States could force a peace in Ukraine tonight. We're funding one side. There is no Ukrainian army outside of NATO. If NATO withdrew its support for Ukraine, Ukraine would crumble in a day. So we are the only power in the world that can bring both sides to the table to force a peace, which will be unsatisfactory as all forced peaces are. Like each side will give more than it wants, but that's the only option. Otherwise, I would bet my house on it. We are going to war with Russia. And of course, the stakes are everything, our life on.
Okay, so let's stop there for just a moment. Did you hear what he said? We're going to go to war with Russia. And on one hand, he said because they want to secure the elections. But then he said we're going to go to war with Russia because they want it anyways. All right, so you've got to sit there and decipher what he just said. He also said, I would bet my house on it. So now, go back to all of the things that I explained to you, and all of those things are verifiable. And then connect it to what Tucker just said, not about the elections, but about going into a hot war with Russia because they want a hot war with Russia. Okay? Stop and think about that. You just stew on that for just a moment, okay? You do that. We'll continue on.
Life on the planet. I mean, these are the two biggest nuclear arsenals in the world facing off against each other. So, like, this is insane. They're insane. These are people who think men can become women, who believe that face masks save you from COVID. I mean, these are not rational people. Would they go to war with Russia? Of course they would. Again, they want to anyway. And I don't know why Republicans don't get this at all, but they don't seem to get it. And meanwhile, Republican leaders, and Mitch McConnell's senile too, so I don't even blame him, but all the stupid Republican senators and McCarthy in the House, I mean, it's pathetic. These people are all on board with the war against Russia. Why?
Well, I think it may even be scarier because you say they believe masks work or they believe men can become women and so on.
Okay, so they believe they can go to war with Russia. Now, I want you to stop and think about this. If I told you, and I did, that under the NDAA, that they declared the U.S. a battle zone or a war zone, and we're on a path to war with Russia, and I already showed you that the Russians in Iran and Venezuela and North Korea created a nuclear horseshoe around the United States, where Russia is down in South America, China is now in South America, and under the NDAA, they've declared the U.S. a battle zone, and we've had men of fighting age come into our borders for the last 15 years plus, like a quiet red dawn. And then you take and you look at how they want to balkanize the United States, and they've already done this into 10 regions. And under those 10 regions, the balkanization started with Nixon, but Obama actually concreted this by selecting 10 heads of 10 of these regions, a governor from each of these regions and a senator from each of these regions, to be a liaison between these regions and D.C. And then I showed you a map of paths coming into the U.S. by these are transportation routes, but these are routes similar to what the military deems as possible invasion routes from all directions. And so if you take a look at that and you say, well, the Chinese are in Mexico running the border, but running the ports, and they're in Mexico across the Mexican border, which we've seen their bases there, and the Russians are coming in through Goose Lake Neck, Montana, and other places, then you possibly can kind of put two and two together and say that they're going to collude, the Russia and China, because now they're buddies, and with all these other third world nations, they're going to invade the U.S. in these various routes. And we've got maps showing the similar thing coming from the north, right over the North Pole, and through all these various areas for the Russians to come in. And we've declared the U.S. a battle zone. It's only safe to say that they plan on fighting World War III on our soil. And with what is going on with our so-called leaders today, I would venture to say they're planning on not winning. They, instead of being a fight with our military, as in Red Dawn, we're gonna kind of like just hand the white flag over, and it's going to be up to the citizens to decide how this plays out. So, if you connect the dots, connect those dots, I think they're very, very telling. And so then you have people within our shores tipping the Constitution on its head. Even like, and this is where this is exactly what I said is going to happen. California Democrats approve a new tax on guns and ammunition dealers and manufacturers. You see, folks, they don't have to attack us where it hurts as far as actually outlawing firearms before all this takes place so that we can't fight all this. They just have to tax the ammunition into oblivion, and then what you have is completely useless because you won't be able to afford to buy anything for what you have. Okay? Now, going back to the Quiet Red Dawn, well, take a look at this. All this is from American Military News. But busload of migrants, the 12th, sent by Texas, arrives in Los Angeles. So ever since Jade Helm and before, we have watched these buses take illegal people from the southern border and take them into the thumb of Michigan, up into near Alpena. We've seen them take them into the Dakotas, into Minnesota, into New York, into Massachusetts. We've seen them take these busloads of these people all over the place. And then talking about the horseshoe and the alliances between Russia and Venezuela, Iran and North Korea, now Russia is proposing joint naval drills with China and North Korea. Now, if you remember, when Trump was in office and North Korea, and he calmed North Korea down, we had the Chinese on the ready. We had people in China saying the Chinese were heading to the border of China and North Korea, and the Russians were coming in from the northeast. The Chinese were coming in from the northwest, and they were getting ready to come in and bolster up North Korea and come down into South Korea. And now Russia, here again, is proposing that Russia has a joint naval drill exercise with China and North Korea. Now, understand this. They've already done drills with China by themselves. Now they're pulling North Korea into this. So when I say, you know what, you might want to take on a little reading list and get yourself understanding how to take care of yourself. Now I've laid the groundwork as to why you might want to do that. Let's go into exactly what it is that I am suggesting you take a look at. And as a starter list, this is just a starter list as to what you might want to read or what you might want to put on your bookshelf for later use. So having said that, Once again, this is Freedom and Survival. I'm Tim Wright, and let's get into the list here. So first off, I'm going to share with you this list. It is obviously not conclusive or inclusive. It is just a short list. And I have read just about every one of these books. So the first few books are going to be fictional. This book is Avalon by Larry Michael Russin. Now, why would I suggest a fictional book? Because like this and a few of the others I'm going to share, Larry Michael Russin was a naval intelligence officer. Okay, and he wrote this book. It's not the smoothest read, but he gives you a lot of insight as to how to collect and gather with other people, find people of like mind, and create a retreat with people with different skill sets, so that each person can bring in their strengths and collectively weather out what might be ahead. And so you have Larry Michael Russin. Now he has written these 3 books. Now before he passed away, he said he was going to turn this into a trilogy. Now I don't know if this is the trilogy or if there was something else he was going to rename. But you have Avalon, the Retreat, and Avalon Beyond the Retreat. Now you could have gotten these on Amazon. I don't know if they're still available or not. I don't know if his son is allowing that. Now as I it's not this one. Let me look at this one here. I'll share with you what I do. So he brings a lot of insight with these books. The next author is very similar, and the next author is Matthew Bracken. Now Matthew Bracken also is he was a Navy SEAL. Okay. Now I have spoken to Matthew Bracken twice. Once on a radio interview. Now, where I and Watson Prunier was talking with him on Freedom and Survival when we had initially started the podcast. But Matthew Bracken was a Navy SEAL when back in the 80s when I was in the Army, and he was at Lebanon, I believe, when the barracks were going through what they were going through. So Matthew Bracken is very prophetic, and he lays out exactly what was going to happen in our land to bring about what we're seeing come about, and he nailed it. He's got Enemies Foreign, that's one book. Enemies Domestic, that's another book. And then this book, Enemies Foreign and Domestic. I highly suggest you get all 3 of his books. You can get them in softcover, hardcover, and on Kindle. He also has a book called Castigo K that talks about human trafficking down in the Caribbean. And so Matthew Bracken's books, I highly, highly suggest you get his books. The next set of books, again, are 3 books. I've only got 2 of them here. But this is by James Wesley Rawls. He's very well known in the survival and self-sustainment community. He's got Patriots, and then he's got Survivors and Patriots, or Patriots and Survivors. But he's got 3 books. And he also gives you a lot of insight as to how to set things up, how to fortify vehicles, how to fortify doors and windows. And what I've done is I have taken and listed all of those ideas by page and given myself an indicator as to what I see on those pages. So that's why I suggest you read the books and begin to do something like that. Circle what is meaningful, circle what you can take from it and learn from it. Even though what they do is they put education into a fictional format, but they're really educating you. And then James Wesley Rawls also wrote How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It. And this is actually kind of like a handbook. This is literally a handbook, which leads me to the next set of books. So while I'm going to share with you this next set of books and then go back to some fictional stuff, the reason why I'm using that as a segue is because then you want to get yourself into actual handbooks, actual how-to books, such as things like a pocket first aid guide, or 101 easy things you can do to ready your home for a disaster. Okay? So even if the so-called apocalypse, which is a misnomer and a abuse of the word, doesn't happen, if your home is prepared for anything, a natural disaster, a weather disaster, then you're further ahead than somebody who simply isn't prepared for anything. And along the same lines, then you can also get things like this British Special Forces handbook on survival. And this has all kinds of stuff like edible plants, poisonous bugs, poisonous snakes, how to tie knots, how to get water, how to create water, how to filter water, how to create shelters, first aid, equipment, tactical stuff, survival at sea. Get the book. Just get the book. And in like fashion, get military field manuals and training manuals. You can get these off of Amazon. You can get them off of eBay for next to nothing. Field manual, guerrilla warfare and special forces operations. These are actual military books that you can get for like $3, $5. Training manual, TM, training manual, FM, field manual. Improvised munitions, field manual, map reading and land navigation. These are just some examples. Start broadening your horizons, start educating yourself so that you are prepared for what is coming down the pipe or what might come down the pipe. Get things like how to prepare and preserve foods, whether it be domestic foods such as cattle, beef, lamb, chicken, whatever it might be. Get your books, begin to understand how to prep and preserve and store food. Begin to understand if you can't go to the store for medicines, for clothing, for curtains, for blankets, for anything you might need to mend, get yourself just simple how-to books. And how to create gardens in any situation. Get gardening books that are specific to your region, based on climate, based on the growing season, the length of it, based on the soil in your area. based on the plants that grow in your region. Get your gardening books, and then take and mix them in and create your landscapes around your food needs. Learn what wild plants are edible, what wild plants are not edible. Learn how to get land dirt cheap. Okay? Learn weapon systems. Learn American weapon systems and learn others' weapon systems so you can identify who you are looking at. Understand how they've been trained. Understand how they, even though they might look domestic, if you can see them being how they've been trained and how they stand, begin to understand that. Let me explain that for just a moment. So, if you can understand how somebody else has been trained, even though they might look like you can then see that they really are not from you. So let me give you two examples. During the protest of the 1%, so to speak, and then you had Antifa come out of that. Well, you had BLM, Ferguson, and then Antifa come out of that. There were cities in which there were people watching and controlling what was going on there. And while they were dressed in tactical civilian clothing, aka brown cargo tactical pants and black shirts, they did not carry themselves like American military. That ought to tell you something as to what I've said previously. The second example to that is I was in a certain city working with police, and the lieutenant called me sergeant. I'm like, why did you call me sergeant? He says, because I know you were a sergeant in the military because of how you carry yourself. And I had my army hat on. He says, I know you were a sergeant in the army because of how you carry yourself. He ID'd me in 15 seconds by how I conducted, how I walked, the stance of my shoulders, how I kept my head up and not down, how I didn't act flippant, how I didn't need to be told what to do. He knew that I was an NCO in the United States Army. Folks, learn how others are trained and identify them, be able to identify them even if they're not wearing their native garb. You understand that? So let's go back to a few more books. There was a book series, I can't remember the author, but 1 Second After. He wrote a couple of books that are very, very beneficial to read in how you can see things going on. So here is The Pulse about EMP. Now, I don't agree with a lot of what's being said about EMPs today. I just don't agree with it because it doesn't make logical sense and the dots don't connect. But if you understand the possibilities of EMP or a solar flare, you can prepare yourself and conduct yourself accordingly. Now, I've read about 15 of these books. And while these are completely and 100% fictional, they're just a really good read. And by the way, there is some adult content, not specific, but not detailed, but specific that I wouldn't agree with either. But tactically, good books to read. And then there is the author, Joe Nobody. This dude, I have never met him. I don't know about him, but this dude's a good writer. You can get these on Amazon. You get every book you can get on him. The Ascent, Independents, Holding Their Own, and Holding Their Own. This dude is a smooth writer, very good. Just a very, very good writer. Now, there's one other very good book that I would highly recommend, along with the book on how to get your own bug out land, and that is what is called Strategic Relocation by Joel Skousen. And Joel Skousen takes all kinds of data, all kinds of demographics, all kinds of laws, all kinds of gun laws, homeschool laws, just all kinds of stuff, and puts it into a compact book and goes region by region, state by state, country by country to help you decide where you might want to have a second, third, and or fourth location to go to if you need to move out of where you're at. Strategic Relocation. The book is worth every penny. And that book somehow escaped my bookshelf. It's around somewhere. I have no idea where it went. But I highly recommend Strategic Relocation by Joel Skousen. And then you have your theological books. Of course, last but most important, the Bible, God's holy word. Now, why do you say that would be a book? Number one, because more important than anything is your relationship with Almighty God. And He set things up to restore your relationship with Him so that even though you might die, you might live eternally. So your relationship with God is first and foremost. Secondly, He does have principles in His Word that would say it is wise to prepare. Proverbs: the wise man sees trouble from afar and prepares and is preserved. The fool turns his back and is destroyed. Joseph: 7 years of good times, good crops, and preserves food for 7 years of famine. God told him, he listened, he did it. Jonah: build the ark. The disciples, 3 days before Jesus went to the cross. If you don't have a sword that is a fighting self-defense weapon, sell a coat and buy a sword. That wasn't the first time He said, don't take a sword to the house of Israel because they're going to take care of you. You're going into the world, buy a sword. Buy a weapon of war for self-defense. Nehemiah chapter 4. Build the wall, build the perimeter, and by the way, carry in your hand a weapon of war while you toil and build with your other hand. Put watchmen in the gaps, put watchmen on the high places for warnings. And if you don't think that you can do this, do it for your family, do it for your wife, do it for your parent, do it for your son, for your daughter, for your grandchild. He flat tells you why and how to do it, what to do, and the motivation behind it. So all through Scripture, even the New Testament, we are told and given principles on preparedness. Jesus never called us to be passive. Turn to Him the other cheek has nothing to do with self-defense. That Scripture is so twisted. It has to do with humility and being available for a person's eternal well-being. And we are told to love our enemy and to pray for those who persecute us. But love your family and your neighbor more than your enemy and defend them. You don't have to fight your enemy out of hate and anger. You have to stand against them out of love for those around you and for what is right. The Bible is clear on its principles if you understand it. So those are the books that I recommend. Those are the reasons why I would suggest preparing your heart and mind. And you can do these things for relatively little to no money. And just do it one at a time. You don't need every little book. Start with the how-to books and then get into the other books. Start with what is actually going to help you prepare food, what is going to help you be able to clothe yourself, shelter yourself, whether it's a personal blanket or whether it's a roof over your head of some sort, heat, water. Get yourself ready to go. So, with that, those are some of my recommendations and why. Those are the things that I recommend. So if this has been beneficial to you, I ask that you like, follow, subscribe, share, all of the above. Help me continue to build this channel and all of the others. If you're on Rumble, please follow all of my channels so that I can live stream to all of them so I don't have to pay the monthly fee. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Share it with those that you know. And again, I'm Tim Wright with Freedom and Survival, and I thank you for joining me. I look forward to joining you on the next video.